Hi, welcome back to The Colorblind Architect Does Archicad, and today we're going to be talking about exterior claddings, specifically how to use the curtain wall tool to create the reveal lines that you need for your elevations so that it's not just in the elevations but it's actually in the model. So as you can see on the screen, I'm looking at a project that I did in the recent past. It was a remodel of an existing home, and you can see some of the cladding on the screen. This cladding is actually from the CAD image or central innovation tools. It's called the coverings tools. The covering tool is a fantastic tool. Today's discussion is not going to be on that. I just wanted to show you, because if you haven't tried these out, they are absolute fantastic, especially for doing homes. They allow you to actually have a 3D modeled trim and weatherboards, your clapboard siding or board and bat siding. Really helpful for residences especially. But that is not going to cut it when you need to have a commercial structure where you need to define where you want your reveals. Because what tends to happen in the CAD image coverings or other methods of creating exterior claddings is because it's automated, it's not going to allow you to create the custom lines where you want to line up with window headers or door headers or verticals, or creating your own expansion joint lines in the exterior cladding. So let's get started. Okay, again, today we're going to be talking about exterior claddings. So here's an example of a recent building that I did where I wanted to define where the control joints are, the panel joints are in the concrete. We went with a kind of a brutalist style concrete mix, where we've got the reveals and the tie holes actually exposed. It was part of the idea of creating a fortress-like feel to this building. And what I ended up doing for this one, originally I started it out with using morphs and trying to model it all up and then copying it, and then it was such a hassle. And then Graphisoft came out with the tool called Paramo. I don't know if you've tried Paramo. This particular object is a Paramo object. It allows you to create objects that are a little bit smarter. They actually use the parametric stuff, but it doesn't use the programming languages of GDL, which is really complicated, really difficult to learn. It's not that you can't, it is easy enough, but honestly, I'm an architect. I just don't have time to do computer programming. So that's why Paramo was such an exciting thing for me. But what I discovered when I've been playing with this methodology is that it is still time consuming. I still have to manually adjust the height and the width of every single one of these panels. In addition, I also have to set how many tie holes and everything. And to a certain extent, the tie holes look great. This makes the building look really legit. But it's still a little bit too much, especially on a larger building. I'm working on a larger apartment building, and this was just taking way too long to do this method. So that's where I came up with this new concept. And maybe it's not that new, but it's to use the curtain wall tool as a means of creating the exterior cladding. Now, I have a sample building that I've put together just for the purposes of this tutorial. This is really bad design. It's literally just to show this. What you can see, I've got the reveals into the concrete like we showed before. The difference with this is I do not have the tie holes. And then I wanted to show what it might look if you use like an Lignobond, you know, a composite aluminum finishing system. I know those aren't extremely common because of how expensive they are, but I wanted to do something that's a little bit tougher, just so that I can illustrate the power of using the curtain wall tool as an exterior cladding. Now, first, you can see this particular panel, these panels for the actual concrete finish. This is actually a curtain wall. It's the curtain wall tool. It's pretty cool. And then up here, the Lignobond, the same thing. I mean, I even have the little curving joints of the panel as it goes in to fit into the reveal lines. So it makes for a much more convincing building, even though, yeah, like I said, this is just a really rough demo just to show you. So let's get started on how you would set this up. First, let's do the concrete. So on the concrete, I am going to start by going to the curtain wall tool, and we're going to click on this. And as we're creating this, let's start by creating the scheme with, you know, whatever size you want, but I want to make this really big for the scheme. So 300 feet by 300 feet, you can put whatever in there that you think is plenty. The whole idea is I don't want to have any automated frames into this curtain wall system. I want this to just be a big open field. Next, we want to go into our frame design. Our frame design, we want to set everything to invisible. There are no frames on this system. Next, we also want to make sure that on every single one of these options, down here, under the boundary frame type and geometry, we want to set the offset from the center of the frame to be 0. This way, the joints of the concrete for the concrete panel reveals are actually going to come right up next to each other. So our next step is we need to define the panels. On the panels, you can go ahead, I'm going to use the main panel just because that's what the scheme is set up for, and I'm going to set it to the CW panel, in this case 25, because I'm using Archicad 25 for this example, but any version that has the curtain wall tool should still function with this methodology. The next thing is, I don't necessarily care about the thickness here because that's not relevant to this particular setup. And then I'm going to go to general settings for this panel, and as you can see, the panel has this option for a bevel. So it defaults to the 90 degree. Just go ahead and set it to 45 or 60 or whatever you want that reveal bevel to be. And then on the thickness of this, we're just going to go ahead and set that at 1 inch. Or you can set it to whatever the depth of the reveals that you want to have. The point is, you want to make sure that it's just all the overall same thickness. Turn off the back and front coating because this is all monolithic concrete, so we don't need to do that. And if you want to save some time, if you don't have as fancy a computer, you can turn off shadow casting. Personally, I leave it on because I've got a really good graphics card, I've got plenty of RAM, so I'm gonna just let the computer have some fun and do all the work. So now we're going to go on to the representations and surfaces. You can go ahead and set your attributes and all that stuff. The thing we want to look for is the panel building material. We're going to change this to concrete topping. You can choose whatever material you want. In this case, I just want it to look like the concrete. Great. So, but I also don't want to see any seams in the concrete. That's important because we're trying to do this because we're trying to control where the seams are. So once you have all that, go back to the top part of the curtain wall system. Let's just make sure that we have our nominal thickness set to the same thing. That's also important, just to make sure that we're not getting any kind of weird dimensions. And you can also even change the panel center. It's just to make sure that when we're drawing this, it's actually going to show up right. Okay, and also make sure your frames are inside the boundary. Finally, we can click OK, and as you can see, we're actually ready to start drawing this curtain wall. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate to this side of the building that I have not started doing any work on. And I'm just going to go ahead and snap to this corner at the grid. And I'm going to go ahead and draw this particular curtain wall out to that edge. Now, you'll notice I had it set at 16 feet. I'm going to set it to match the other. And then if you also zoom in, you can actually see, I know the colors are probably not helping. Let me see if I can turn on the white model to make it a little bit clearer what's going on. Okay, yeah, so you can see how it's actually reversed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drag and snap to the opposite, and then I'm going to hit P, which is the keyboard shortcut for flipping a wall or a curtain wall. And now you can see we actually have this beveled concrete panel filling up this whole thing. Now, as you recall, there were openings in the wall, just like on this other side. There were also reveals. So what do we do for that? Well, let's go ahead and get started. So with it selected, we're going to go ahead, you see the little edit command, we're going to click on that, and that brings up this little menu here. This is a little layer palette for the internals of the curtain wall. So we're going to turn on the scheme grid and turn off the panels. Okay, now you can see what's underlying. So the wall beyond and the curtain wall openings beyond for the actual glazing. So now I'm going to select the curtain wall scheme tool and select the input method grid. With that, I can start drawing the reveals. Now, because obviously I want these reveals to line up with the openings, I'm going to go ahead and snap to the openings, and by clicking on that corner, I can either go to the side or up, and that way I can decide which one I want. I want both actually, so I'm going to just go ahead and select that one and click, select that one and click, and we're just going to repeat that until we have all these reveals properly selected. You'll want to be careful, just to make sure you're actually clicking on what you want to click, just because you could be off by just a little. And finally, I'm gonna go ahead and snap to the midpoint here, add another reveal joint, just because typically those concrete panels, you have to keep them within a certain range. I'm not being too exact on that, but obviously you want to make sure that this is actually a constructible reveal pattern. So once you have all that, you can turn your panel layer back on, and as you can see, we now have these beautiful concrete reveals. So let's flip back to the arrow tool, because our next problem is we need to reveal the openings. So if you remember which panels were covering up your openings, go ahead and select those panels. I'm shift clicking so that I can select multiple, and then just hit delete. It's pretty simple. Now click on exit, and now you have a beautiful concrete panel wall, a concrete wall with these reveals, and it looks great. It doesn't have the tie holes. I'd love to be able to get the tie holes in there too, but not for today's lesson. So the next thing we're going to be doing, and let me go ahead and switch back to the regular 3D view. Okay, our next one is the Lignobond. So just to save us some time, I'm going to go ahead and medicine dropper what I've already done, so I can just walk you through how to set this up. Now you'll notice that I have this profile manager sitting over here. That's because I did leave this open, but to create the profile, you will need to create a profile to create that curving panel. So on the complex profiles profile manager, and you go ahead and create it either new or duplicate it from another one. In this case, I'm going to click on edit to show you how I created it. So the origin point, that's set to the thickness, the nominal thickness, the thickness of the panel to the frame to the center point of the glazing that you set in your curtain wall. In this case, it was 1 inch on the prior. We're just going to go ahead and stick with that. I believe I already have it correct in this model, so just that's what you're trying to go for, is you're trying to set it to the center point of the glazing, which in this case we're calling the glazing the Lignobond panel that's going to be lining up with this, okay? And then I'm only drawing the edges, not the whole panel, because obviously the panels are going to be different sizes, so we want to make sure that we draw this in as a filled region on the profile. This profile I drew in with a radius and then kind of stopped it there. Set the building material to trim a Lignobond, and then this is actually the reveal that's inside that actually holds the Lignobond panels. It's highly simplified. If you want the actual details, you can go to Lignobond's website or any other composite aluminum manufacturer's detail library and actually just trace over their DWG if you'd like. In this case, I'm just trying to show how you can do it. Once you have all that set up and you've set your building materials, make sure it's set to be a library part. That's so that it can actually be used in the curtain wall. And then of course save. Once you're all done with that, you're going to go back into your 3D model or your floor plan, wherever you want to start this, and we're going to choose the curtain wall tool. It's time for us to set this up. So first, on the curtain wall system, I've got this set up with the 1 inch nominal thickness. On the panel center, it's set at 1.5 inches. I'm gonna leave it there because I already got this working right and I don't want to mess with it. But you may have to play around with these things to get your version right. On this scheme, I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the concrete, 300 feet on the height and the width, just because I don't want to have any reveals already set. I'm manually setting all the reveals on purpose so that they line up with the glazing. Now, to go to the frames, again, I'm going with invisible on this one. Now, one alternative that you might consider is having a complex profile for your actual frame that would be the clips that hold the Lignobond system in. In this case, I drew it into the panel edges, so, figure out which way works best for you. That's how I'm setting it up on this one. Then on the panels, we're going to choose for our main panel, we're going to go ahead and select the profiled edge panel. Now on the profiled edge panel, I am setting a thickness on this because I do have a thickness of the glass or the Lignobond panel. Again, remember, the curtain wall panel system in Archicad's designed for glazing. We're using it for another purpose. So then we're going to go down here to the settings and we're going to choose the profile, in this case the one that I created before, and I opted for the profile origins position aligned to inset, but you can play around with these and see what the effects are. I turned off the opening, set this to 0, and made the width 3/4 of an inch, and so now we move on to the next. Our next is the number of skins. This has to do with the actual glazing insert. In this case, you could go to the extent of, if it's the composite Lignobond panels, you could actually have the 3 layers where you have the core inside and the aluminum on the outside, if you really want to get into that detail. In this case, I just simplified it down to 1 skin and set it at a thickness that matched the profile. So this, like I said, this is a dumb example just to teach how to do this. So then we can move on to our next settings. You can set your opening lines, silhouettes, and then finally your representations. Go ahead and get all those set. Once you have this all done, you can go back into here and we're gonna go ahead and draw our curtain wall into the 3D. Obviously you can set, while you're drawing it, you could have set your home story and your height and all that stuff. Great, wonderful. Now let's zoom in just to see where the, yeah, there you go. Zoomed in a little bit too far. Zoom in just to see where the curvature is. Okay, good. We've got that in the right place. Now I know that the wall that we're putting this up against is actually 2 inches inset from the concrete. And then I'm also going to shorten this by 2 inches. Shorten this by 2 inches so that we have a joint. Now another thing that you can do is you can also create a corner frame to cover this gap. We might cover that in a future episode. And we're going to go ahead and take this one and also peel it back a couple inches. And now that we have that set up, we're going to go ahead and click on edit, and then we're going to go to the that was my son popping in and interrupting the video.
Sorry.
So then we're going to go to the scheme grid and turn off panels so that we can see the contents underneath. And let's select the scheme tool, grid selection, grid method, and let's just go ahead and start drawing in those grids. Again, this might take a moment while I do this. Not that big of a deal.
What?
And then we're gonna I'm making a video.
Oh.
Yes. The joys of having kids, right? All right. And we're just gonna go ahead and follow all these corners of windows to create the reveal lines that we wanted. And obviously you can add additional if you wanted to, like I could create another one there and another one there. Once I have that all in, I can go ahead and turn the panels back on, grab the arrow tool. Let's just go ahead and start deleting out the panels that are covering up windows. And we are almost done. Now, once we're done with that, we click on the exit button, and we now have our reveals and a panelized system where we have determined where the reveals are going to show up. And the best part is now your elevations are going to look that much better because they're going to have clean reveal lines that you can actually dimension and show your contractors where you want to put the reveals. And so hopefully this has been helpful. Again, I'm the colorblind architect doing Archicad. Peace out.